Oh, I was in charge of putting record on. Sorry. Recording has started. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We're going to go ahead and get started. Today's webinar is going to be on marine flare management and disposal. Today's meeting is going to be recorded and the slides are going to be available. So for those who do not want to be part of the recording, just keep your cameras off, your microphones off, and we'll be sharing the recording and the final slides once they're uploaded to our YouTube and website. My name is Dr. Joanne Brash. I work with the California Product Stewardship Council. I'm a special projects manager and I'm leading all of our marine flare grant projects. With us today, we also have Vivian Matuk. And Vivian, would you like to do a self-introduction?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Joanne. My name is Vivian Matuk. Very excited to be with all of you here today. I'm the Environmental Boating Program Manager for both the California State Parks and the California Coastal Commission. And thank you for inviting me to be here with all of you today.
Thank you. And if anyone has any questions at any point, please put them in the chat. No reason to wait for the Q&A. We have staff members who are monitoring the chat box. So if it's a clarifying question, we can always discuss it as we're going. But any of the discussion questions we'll hold till the end. So please feel free to write comments, questions, share some links. We love when these meetings are interactive. So the California Product Stewardship Council, we're a nonprofit. We're based out of Sacramento, but we do work all over the state of California. We're a really small team, but we have a lot of influential people who are on our board and funding us, including cities and counties throughout California. As you can see on our board, we have urban and rural, we have northern, central, and southern. So we try to get a representation of the entire state. And we always want to start, oh, I need to make sure I'm sharing my slides, sorry. Let me go back. Thank you everyone for your patience. So we always start with a big thank you to our funders. Without the support of the local jurisdictions and their waste authorities, we wouldn't be here working on all the hard to manage products and establishing permanent programs that are sustainable and fairly and equitably funded. We also have our sponsors, which are the private businesses that are supporting CPSC and helping in pursuit of our mission. Our mission at CPSC is ultimately to create an economy that supports waste management programs that are not entirely burdened on the local government to plan, to fund, to manage. By engaging the industry and engaging producers of the hard to manage products, it's a more collaborative approach to creating a program that is permanent, sustainably funded, and contributes to the health and well-being for all Californians. So we're going to pass it straight to Vivian, and Vivian's one of our experts working with the California Coastal Commission and the state parks, specifically on the green marinas, but we have been collaborating for a few years now on the marine flare issue. And she's going to share a little background on what are marine flares, how are they regulated, and how they've been collected in the past. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and allow Vivian to share her slides.
Thank you so much, Joanne, and thank you everybody for being with us today. If you may give me the authorization, Joanne, to share my screen, please, or Yalin.
Should be working now.
Yes, no worries. I can see mine already. Okay, so we're going to start from a bird's eye view perspective, talking about what marine flares are, what type of boats or boaters need to comply with this requirement, why they are considered hazardous waste in our state, and why they are an issue in California. So first of all, marine flares are a visual distress signal or a pyrotechnic device that either produces a brilliant light or a plume of colorful smoke in order to attract attention in case of an emergency and being able to pinpoint the boater's exact location. The two most common type of flares that you can find out there include the handheld flares, which ignite on the ground, and the aerial flares, which are fired into the air. They have to be produced or manufactured following the Coast Guard specification to be approved as a visual distress signal. But let's talk about what kind of boats are required to carry the flares, because it's not all type of boats. So based on the Coast Guard, the vessels that are longer than 16 feet in length, operating on coastal waters, the Great Lakes, territorial seas, and waters directly connected to them are required to carry approved visual distress signals such as pyrotechnic flares. And of course, there are exceptions to the rules. Some of the exceptions include recreational boats that are less than 16 feet in length, open sail boats that are less than 26 feet in length and not equipped with a propulsion machinery, and manually propelled boats. For these exceptions, vessels are only required to carry nighttime distress signals when operating from sunset to sunrise. So let's talk about what are some of the minimum requirements when carrying flares. So they include 3 daytime and 3 nighttime flares to meet the visual distress signal requirements, or only 3 pyrotechnic flares if they are approved for both daytime and nighttime use. So, for example, red color handheld and aerial pyrotechnic flares are approved for both daytime and nighttime use, and orange color flares are approved for daytime use only. So according to the Coast Guard, the average shelf life for the flares is between 36 to 42 months from the manufacture date. And failure to have visual distress signals or having only expired flares on a vessel could result in a fine, which is around $1,100. And a lot of the boaters can check the expiration date directly by checking the flares, as you can see in this bottom photo. So why are marine flares considered hazardous material, specifically in California? Now we're focusing in our state. So the California Department of Toxic Substances Control, and from now on, we're going to call them DTSC, classify pyrotechnic flares that will no longer be used for their intended purpose as hazardous waste because they are toxic, reactive, and ignitionable. So they have very bad or toxic ingredients, including the ones that I'm listing there, including the famous perchlorate, which is considered a hazardous material recognized to be a waste that can impact or a toxic that can impact human health and also water quality, and also strontium nitrate or peroxide, among others. So why marine flares are an issue in our state? So we just talk a little bit about the fact that they are hazardous waste. They can impact human health for obvious reason, also environmental impacts, also because of the water quality component that can impact our aquatic environment. They are a fire danger, and we'll talk a little bit about that issue a little bit more in a few seconds. But it turns out that unfortunately in California, and let's remember that California is one of the top states in terms of recreational boating, because we have an amazing state and tons of opportunities for people to recreate outdoors. But unfortunately in California, we don't have any permitted facility to collect, treat, and properly dispose of expired flares in our state. Actually, there are only in the entire country 3 facilities. 2 of them use incinerators in the state of Utah and Louisiana, and 1 uses an open burning system, which is in Missouri. So as you can imagine, collecting them and taking them to those facilities out of our beautiful state is pretty expensive. It costs around $7 to $50 per flare to be able to collect them and ship them and properly dispose of them. I also mentioned to you the impacts that these flares can put not only in human health, aquatic environments, the water quality, but also it's a fire risk. And let me give you a couple of examples. A lot of people feel like, oh, what's the big issue? Let's use the 4th of July or any festivity to burn them. It turns out that we have to all remember that false emergency distress calls generated by flares are subject to a felony, and they can be also subject to severe criminal and civil penalty under the Coast Guard Title 14, Section 88, and the penalties are really bad. Plus, you have to pay the cost of activating the Coast Guard for false emergency distress. So we don't want people to do that because it's not the best way to get rid of expired marine flares. So working in my field, I had the opportunity to talk to many boaters, as well as marine operators, as well as boating safety experts, including Coast Guard auxiliary power squadrons. And it was brought to my attention that, hey, there's an issue in California. We cannot properly dispose of expired marine flares, which sometimes are abandoned in trash in marinas. So it's a big issue. So we decided to put together a working group with the Department of Toxic Substances Control, CalRecycle, the California Office of Emergency Services, as well as, for example, the San Francisco Department of Public Health. And we started doing not only a research in California, but also we did a national survey. And we identified that not only in California, but the rest of the nation is a big issue. And a lot of the states were actually collecting the flares without following proper and legal requirements when we communicated with the Department of Transportation. So it has been a tough educational experience for the state and for the local jurisdictions, but I usually tell everybody, get excited. California is, of course, once again, leading the effort. And thanks to the work that we did with the working group, CalRecycle created the grants that now local jurisdictions can apply to properly plan and conduct these collection events. So this is one option that we have. In addition to that, we have been meeting with the Department of Transportation. We raised the effort here, or the voice here in California, to the point that the first flare that was created nationwide, that is an electronic flare, and I know Joanne will be talking about that later on, came from our beautiful San Diego region. So there have been a lot of conversation going on. We also identified that California produces over 174,000 flares on an annual basis. It's an estimated that dates a few years back. So we wanted to know what's going on. So right now, there are options. You don't want to take the time from Joanne, but a lot of jurisdictions are working really hard. We want a lot of the jurisdictions to apply for the CalRecycle grant to be able to properly and legally conduct these events. And if we have boaters joining today, or if you get to talk to them, make sure that they contact DTSC for proper disposal. So the more they know, the better, or also your Certified Unified Program agency. I want to briefly share with you some of the results from 2019 events that happened. They were the first in California, mainly supporting the CalRecycle grant, or utilizing that money, that were fully legal in terms of all the permits. So we're very excited to be the first, again, state in the nation leading this effort. That was a combination of efforts between the City and County of San Francisco, Alameda, and San Mateo County. They had 141 participants that collectively were properly to collect from their residents or boats that berthed their boat at those counties, with over 5,900 number of flares collected. So I'm going to turn it over back to you, Joanne, so you can just take it from here. You're muted. You're still muted.
Thank you. And I saw that really good question about the CalRecycle grant. So just to answer that question, so the CalRecycle grants are, you can apply annually. Each of them lasts 2 to 3 years. They range from 50,000 to 100,000. And at the cost of these actual marine flare events, usually we can only get 1, maybe 2 of these events within a grant cycle. So even though it's ongoing, it's not really permanent collection for the local jurisdictions. But we have seen quite a few jurisdictions continue to reapply so that they can have multiple events. But one of the challenges is, once you have the first event, you don't want to confuse boaters because they're looking for that long-term solution. So CPSC has been hosting these events with our local grant partners since 2021 was our first like boots on the ground event. Prior to that, we were doing a lot of education, we were doing photo shoots and really building up our campaign material. And in 2021, we did a joint event between Alameda County and Delta Diablo. Delta Diablo is the East Contra Costa County, which is kind of near the Bay Area, near San Francisco. So the benefit of hosting events on the same weekend or same day is that the largest cost of the event is the transportation from California to the facility. So like Vivian said, these are either going to Utah or to Louisiana. And we need an explosives truck that has the DOT permit and all the other laws that has to meet. And so that biggest cost is when it leaves California. So the more jurisdictions that we can get to split the transportation for the out-of-state drop-off, the lower the cost for all the participants. So in 2021, we hosted the 2 events. Well, Alameda County paid out of pocket. They're really a leader in this space. They had the grant originally, as Vivian mentioned, but because they have so many marinas and ports, and it was really important for them to offer this ongoing solution to their boaters, they've been paying out of pocket and really helping CPSC develop a plan on how to best regulate and set up a policy to create a permanent program. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But when you look at the cost of these events, they are really expensive. And Alameda County in November 2021, theirs cost about $13,000 was their share of the event last year. And Delta Diablo was also around $13,000. So, but the cost per flare was a little bit different because like I mentioned, the biggest cost is the transportation. So Alameda County was able to collect a lot more flares because they've been doing these events for quite a few years. The boaters are trained and educated, whereas Delta Diablo, it was the first event they've ever had for marine flares. So CPSC, we were subcontracted because in our expertise, we lead the education, we promote the event, and we do what we call an exchange event. So at these events, we're able to give out free reusables in exchange for disposing of the single use. If they're required to have 3 of these distress signals, if we can transition at least 1 to a reusable, we're already going to see a source reduction in how many we generate. So the more of these events we can do, the better, but ultimately the more reusables we can get in the market, it's significantly better. So in 2022, there were 2 events already. So I'm going to hand it back to Vivian and keep this slide up because earlier, just about a month or 2 ago, she was able to work with 2 of the largest ports in the country or in the state, and she's going to share some of the results from those.
Okay. So yeah, so thank you, Joan, and I'm very excited. I always said that one of my goals is to retire and being able to solve this statewide issue that we started working 10 years ago. I think we're heading the right direction with many factors coming into this problem and always appreciating what Alameda did. Bruce, fantastic, colleague, and also great technical assistance he has been able to provide to many counties. So I know Jesus with Orange County is joining us today. We had 2 events this year where we were able to partner with Orange County and the Port of LA. They went extremely well. As Joanne mentioned, one of the key issues is to educate the public, because boaters are good stewards of the environment. They just need information and their solutions to properly implement some of those best management practices. So Orange County conducted late August an event with 190 boaters attending and over 44 pounds of flares. And then the Port of LA, they had a little bit of more restrictions, and they had 64 boaters attending and over almost 1,400 number of flares collected. Great events. I have here some pictures from both events that were provided by Jesus and his team, as well as the Port of LA. And since we started this program back in 2019, has been our intention to, yes, offer the service and provide the alternative solution for the boater, because it's like treating children, right? You can not only say no, but also come back with something that they can start utilizing for that purpose. So the electronic flares have been a great alternative to transition into leaving out behind the traditional flare. So back at you, Joanne.
Thank you. So the Port of LA and Orange County really set us off for another round of really great events coming up. So we have some events for those of you joining us from the local jurisdictions in these areas. Del Norte County and Humboldt County, which is the 2 furthest north counties. There's a lot of commercial boats there, but also quite a few residential and recreational boaters. But what we found was that Del Norte County, who holds the grant, only had a couple hundred registered boat owners. And because we have to pay that transportation and the extra flares is kind of a negligible cost in addition to the transportation, we've expanded the Del Norte County event to include all of Humboldt County and the registered boaters there. So again, opening the events to more participants so that we can get as many of these flares out of our economy, out of our community, and into safe disposal was one of the great benefits of having these grants. Alameda County with Bruce Ritz, they're hosting another event this year. So our great leader is continuing on the tradition. So that one will be November 6th. And then also on November 6th, in East Contra Costa, there will be an event where, again, you bring in your unwanted, expired flares, and there's an opportunity to get a free reusable. West Contra Costa County decided to do it a little bit different, but is still participating. And at the Richmond location, they will be collecting flares for the next month. So starting October 5th, every day that the HHW facility is open, residents and boaters in that area can bring their flares for safe disposal. There are some challenges when you do ongoing collection like that. For example, they must be stored in a safe magazine. And so when our contracted hauler is going to be picking them up, the plan is basically the trucks will start in Del Norte County, the furthest north, drive down to the Bay Area, picking up the marine flares that have been collected along the way with the participating jurisdictions. And from the Bay Area, we'll head straight out to Louisiana. So it's through this collaboration that each of these counties are able to save significant amounts of money and ultimately work together, because what we found last year is we just didn't fill the truck. So we really, if we're sending a truck all the way to Louisiana and we're paying that extra cost because it's an explosives truck, we want to make sure that we collect as much as we can. So if you go to our website, you can go to CPSC's, we have a Marine Flare webpage, we have a Facebook, and we have an Instagram that we've been posting all of the different events, and we encourage everyone to share them. So this November, between the 5th and the 6th, there are quite a few places that boaters can take their marine flares for safe disposal and possibly get a free reusable as well. So this is our webpage, calpsc.org/CPSC Marine Flare Projects. And on this webpage, we wanted to have one centralized location where you can learn about the flares, you can learn about the reusables, you can find details on the events. But we also have discounts for the reusable. So if you don't get a free one, you can get access to a discounted one. There's also a lot of publications. CPSC as an education-based nonprofit, our mission, like I said, is we want to create programs and to create awareness of the challenges we have with this product. So CPSC is really proud to announce that we were presenting a poster at the International Marine Debris Conference that just happened in Korea. We didn't get to go, but we did present a poster that was presented there. And what's interesting is seeing at one of the largest marine pollution conferences in the world, really focusing on plastics and chemicals. And we were the only one really presenting on marine flares. But what we heard during the review process is how important it is. You have the toxics, which are a water contaminant. You have fire hazards that are risk to the boats, but also if they're shot off on land. And you have other human and health and safety risks if these products are not safely managed. So there are reusable alternatives. And when we see a market shift going from a toxic single-use item to a non-toxic reusable alternative, we know that the market is shifting and that there are opportunities to push the market towards a more sustainable solution. So since this slide was really made, there are two other brands that are Coast Guard approved for their LED reusable distress signals. Sirius Signal is a great partner with CPSC and an Aero Award winner, which is our annual awards where we celebrate companies who are redesigning and taking a new approach to products that are really hard to manage. So Sirius Signal, who's here on the call on the webinar as well. So hi, Stephen, nice to see your name. We're really happy that these products are entering the market. There are now also Coast Guard approved LED flares from Orion and also ACR, which is another company. But at the end of the day, these reusables have a lot more features and are much safer than the pyrotechnics. For example, you're able to test these products before you leave the port. You can bring extra batteries. So if you're, if it runs out, you have a backup. Unlike the single-use pyrotechnics, once you use them, there's no way to test them. There's no way to keep them lit and ongoing. There's also a lot of safety hazards if you're on an inflatable dinghy or your boat with the flares and the pyrotechnic features. So having an LED option is safer. It's safer for the boat, safer for the environment, and it ultimately saves everyone money. It saves the boaters money. They don't have to keep replacing their flares. And it saves our local government a lot of money because, as we mentioned before, our local government with state funding are paying anywhere from $12 to $50 per flare to dispose of them. Yet people are buying them new for often less than $10. So there's an unfair burden of the cost of management when the government has to pay more to manage them at the end of life than the consumers are paying when they buy them. And so when we talk about some of the challenges with hosting these events and planning these events, they're temporary. They're once a year, maybe twice a year. And we can collect all we want, but until we change the product and we address the concerns we have with toxicity and safety, temporary events don't really solve that problem. There's also a lack of permanent collection, which can really lead to misuse and mismanagement. For example, we hear on 4th of July, it's really common to set off your expired flares. But using these expired flares in a way that is not how they're designed, they're safety signals. So if you are not in a distressed situation and you set these flares off, You could face fines. You could be causing unnecessary pollution in the water, and ultimately fire risks that our state just can't handle. So we're paying about $12 to $50 per flare to dispose of them legally and safely. But the costs of the grants don't always cover the full reusables. We're sometimes limited on how much we can spend per flare. And with the reusables being a higher cost, which is expected, right? Your clean canteens and your reusable water bottles cost more than the Dasani and the single-use water bottles. So you would expect to see a higher price because they're more durable, they're multi-use. But we had to engage some of the industry to help us get these reusable flares into the hands of the boaters. We tried coupons, and that were not really successful because even with the coupons, some of the boaters didn't want to make that transition. So in 2021, we had some sponsors. So thank you to Sirius Signal. Thank you to the Boat Foundation USA. We were able to buy this reusable flares, have them in hand for the event, and literally hand them to the boaters. So we found that really successful. We got really great feedback from the people receiving the flares, and we hope to continue that trend in the upcoming events. So when we talk about creating a permanent solution, the way policy works is our state can't just poof, create a new program. There has to be a law that passes that instructs the agency, whether it's DTSC or CalRecycle, to create a program. And every time a new program is created for a new product, it costs money. And so with CPSC's mission, we want to create a permanent program, but we want one that's not paid by the public. We don't want the average consumer's tax money going into this product program when there are other policy options that would make it more equitable to fund an ongoing program. So there's a couple policy options that are often discussed when talking about toxic or hazardous materials. One of them is to phase out altogether. Once we get enough reusables on the market and there's enough support for the transition to reusables, we could possibly pass a law or push the market to start phasing out the single use. We've seen something similar in things like propane cylinders. There are single-use propane cylinders. There are reusable propane cylinders. And we know that the reusables are better, so we've passed a law that has decided to phase those out. So it could be something that would be applied to marine flares also. There could also be more state sponsorship. So looking at more of these grants, more opportunities, more collaboration with the state. But again, it's not the state's problem to solve when the companies who have privatized the profits, meaning they're profiting off the single-use flares, but socializing the problem, meaning the government has to pay to solve this problem. So as much as we love the grants, we really just don't see them as a long-term solution to address all of the concerns affiliated with this one product. And the third type of policy, which is one of the options that CPSC tends to specialize in, which is extended producer responsibility. This is a waste management policy type that has the manufacturers of a product paying into a pot of funds. And those pot of funds are used only for that product type. So it's a fee, not a tax. And now money that is held for that product type is used to collect, transport, and safely recycle or dispose of these products that are covered under the law. In California, we have 12 established, and we just passed 2 new ones this year, so soon to be 14 EPR programs for different product types. And one of the successful philosophies of EPR is that if the industry is paying for that end-of-life disposal, they're incentivized to change their product design or to change the collection infrastructure to make it more efficient than what we currently have. So here at the bottom, we have CPSC is what we call the stewardship spectrum, so that you can kind of understand and visualize how these policies work on a spectrum. So on the far left is true EPR. That means 100% industry funded. They run the program, they manage the products, they created the products, so they know them best. On the other end of the spectrum is product stewardship, which is usually a looser type of policy program where maybe it's not fully funded, maybe there's a consumer fee, things like carpet, mattresses. When you buy those products, you pay a fee, but the industry is still involved with collecting and managing. So anywhere on this spectrum is really good opportunity for hard to manage products that the government can't solve on our own, and we need industry engagement to really find long-term solutions. So there's a lot of opportunities to get involved with the marine flare movement, or if we name the campaign, I'm hoping Reflare Your Fun, but we'll see. We're building our campaign, and in order to build a campaign, we need people to get involved. So in order to get involved with the marine flare opportunities, contact CPSC. And some of the things that we can do to help you are to give you access to some of the background information and the logistics of planning one of these events. We can coordinate advocacy and take policy into a meaningful process. We can apply for a grant together. So CalRecycle releases their HHW grants every spring. CPSC has quite a few applications in every year, specifically on marine flares, because we want more coastal communities getting involved so that A, we can save costs for everyone to share the transportation, and B, we want to get these out of your community. So we are excited to announce that we did get a few grants in the HD 39 cycle. So the city of Oceanside, which is down in San Diego County, just won a grant, and so they'll also be participating next year with the marine flares. You can also buy a reusable. You don't have to wait for an event, and there's a little discount that we can offer you thanks to Sirius Signal. So if you contact us at info@calpsc.org, we can share the discount with you, the discount code. Buy it yourself. But Sirius Signal is a very great company, and so I really encourage the local government who are on this call, even if you're not doing a collection event, to consider buying reusables for giveaways or even your educational boothing, because for when boaters see this product, they just get it. Boaters who've been dealing with expired flares for years finally see solutions in front of their face. We've had really successful opportunities working with yacht clubs and even participants at the events. When they learn, we hand them the reusable, but they see there's other options or higher upgrades from Sirius Signal with the different versions of the reusable. So yeah, if you're interested, just contact us. If you know anyone who's in our grant areas, we can also arrange for free reusables to be delivered. The other thing that we have is our marine flare listserv. So every time we hear news of, good or bad, we share them to our listserv. So a really good opportunity to stay involved if there's new policy or there's certain incidents that have happened because of marine flares. So we encourage everyone to get engaged and to follow along as the marine flare movement continues. So with that, I'm going to open it to questions, and I can't see them on my screen. So what I'm going to do is actually stop sharing my screen so I can see some of the questions that have come up since I started talking. Wonderful. Here we have a question from Aaron. Are those collection events restricted to residents of the county, or could San Mateo residents dispose of their flares at an Alameda event? So it's a little bit of a gray area, but it is open to residents of that area or people with their boats in that area. So sometimes they might berth their boat in the covered jurisdiction, but they live outside of the county. So there is a little flexibility. I would say if you're coming from San Mateo, it might be easier. We could discuss maybe allowing them at Delta Diablo. But because Alameda collects so many on their own, we've been really trying to keep them to as close as possible to their local jurisdiction. We've been getting calls from Marin County, we've been getting calls from Humboldt County and Sonoma County because boaters want a solution. So it's always unfortunate when we do have to turn people away, but if you work with me ahead of time, we can work some flexibility out and get some exemptions if that's possible. But I will say that we do have a grant project that's starting in San Mateo County. And the San Mateo County doesn't have any collection, but it's primarily focused on reusables and the education component. So Erin, if you want to contact me, I can definitely coordinate with you because in the next year, we'll be going to San Mateo County and really looking at what we call dock walking. So actually walking the docks, meeting people and the boaters, showing them the devices or giving them a free device. So we know San Mateo's in the pipeline to get some education, but in terms of collection, we'd have to work something out. Do you have anything to add, Vivian, to that?
No, no, that's pretty much it. I just want to also mention that, you know, a lot of, I even get calls from active Coast Guard asking me how to properly dispose of their flares, which is fascinating. We met with DOT, as I mentioned before, when I started leading the working group that resulted in the grants and the education for the entire state. And they didn't know that this was a national issue. We talked to different states, including Florida. Florida is one of the top states in the nation, like California, as you can imagine, in terms of recreational boating. And they were conducting the events not legally, not getting the DOT permit, Department of Transportation. So now the entire nation is looking at California because for the first time, and thanks to people who are super brave like Bruce and San Francisco and San Mateo, who jumped and said, okay, let's do this. We need to solve this. Now we're being used as models. So I always try to leave these educational opportunities to say, just be proud of what we're doing, because not only the collection events, this is no other state has a model like this. Also vendors who are jumping and being responsible, like the ones that Joanne mentioned, and we're very grateful to have them on board, especially our vendors from San Diego, because it's a California product, and we're very excited to have Sirius, for example. So the important thing is to apply for the grants. And let me ask you, and let me tell you this, every time that we organize the events with Joanne's partnership with Alameda, going back to 2019, I get bombarded by hundreds of emails from people from all over the state saying, so why are you not coming to my county? And I have to tell them, go and bug your county and ask them to apply, because guess what? If CalRecycle doesn't justify the money that is allocated, they're taking it away. And then it would be devastated. I understand we're heading the right direction, but please, please apply and use counties like Alameda, San Mateo, and San Francisco that have been doing an amazing job, and now Contra Costa, moving things forward, and also now Orange County and the Port of LA, which did a fantastic, both of them, job on conducting those amazing events, despite of the weather that was a little bit unstable. But just apply, please.
Thank you. And I see questions about whether commercial flares are allowed. So Bruce answered it correctly. Because the grants are household hazardous waste funding, is residentially generated HHW only. But I will say, Vivian, could you speak to, are the regulations, are the flares different if they're commercial flares, or are they the same?
I would say that I'm not an expert in the commercial world. I haven't had that experience. I only know that my laws for the recreational boats. I think that the requirements, and I don't know, probably Steve, who's joining us, can talk about that. I think the requirements are a little bit different. They're more strict. They're stricter for commercial because they move longer distances. But it's a big issue, especially we're going to be having a Humboldt collection event with Joanne in partnership with the county, and it's going to be a very interesting educational effort because, as we all know, Humboldt County is they have a big commercial fishing fleet, which is a different universe. So we're going to get to learn a lot, but they are very strict in terms of the pyrotechnic devices those vessels are also required to carry on board.
Thank you. And if Steve is still on the call, if you're interested in putting in the chat, if you have any experience with commercial versus residential. But I will say, so one of the other questions is to reshare the list of the events for this year. So let me scroll back. So here's the list of this year's events. There will be free devices at each of these events. And once they run out of the free devices, then they'll start passing out the coupons. So a really good opportunity to get involved and to see what everyone has to offer.
One thing that I wanted to mention, Joanne, if you may, is if you don't feel abandoned, there are so many resources for all the municipalities to work with the partnership with all of us. I have an extensive distribution list. I do a lot of presentations for the Northern and Southern California yachting associations, very close with the marine supply stores. I mean, and boaters are really social. So once one knows, they tend to communicate with others, especially for situations like this, where it is a unique opportunity. So there are tons of opportunities where you can rely on us to do the education and the outreach for you. Happy to assist and use platforms like ours that are, in terms of the boating world, one of the most popular ones, the Boat California Facebook and Twitter page, and Instagram. So reach out to us.
Absolutely. And as Vivian mentioned, sometimes getting the word to these events, like we said, we want to maximize participation. So we are doing something different this year, and we're going to do postcards to every registered boat owner in each of these jurisdictions. We thought a more one-on-one approach would be better than, last year we just kind of limited it to social media and emails. But we decided to take a different approach this year and do a physical card sent to every boat owner. So we're hoping to increase our participation for this November. You can also find this graphic on our social media, which will be posted soon, and then also on the Marine Flare webpage, which Yalin, our staff member, has put the Marine Flare webpage in the chat. So really good opportunity to just read about what we've accomplished and to follow through on some of the proposed events. Are there any other questions? I really want to encourage everyone, or comments, to put them in the chat. We really appreciate all these thank yous that we have from our grant partners, from Bruce, from Lisa. I see Sonoma County is on the call, so maybe next year, we'll see. But we have a question from Allison here, and that says, how do you get registered boaters' addresses for the postcards? So that process, you go through we are going through a mail house, and they basically pay for a list. So the list of addresses is costing us a couple $100s. It's a one-time use list, so we don't actually get to keep the list. If we wanted to keep the list, it would be a higher charge, but you basically pay one of these market research companies. They populate the list, and then they work with the mail house to make sure the postcards go to each of those addresses. So I know you could, make a list or pay for a list for whatever jurisdiction you're in. And what was interesting, actually, when we pulled the numbers was how few boaters there are in some of these areas. Like I said, in Del Norte County, there was really only like 300 residential boaters registered in that county. So that's when we realized, oh my gosh, if every registered boat owner came and everyone had at least 3 flares, we would still be not collecting enough to fill the truck. So that's why we really decided to open it to Humboldt and Sonoma. I know it's a little bit of a drive, but it is open to anyone on the North Coast who wants to drive up to Crescent City and participate. But that's a great question. Thank you, Allison. But if there's any other questions, we're welcome to answer them. And my staff, Yalin, will put the email address for info@calpsc.org. This is our general email address. If you have any questions or if you're interested in applying for the grant, that's one of the best ways to get in contact with us. And we work closely with Vivian. We work closely with the other grant partners who have established grants. So again, as we get more and more jurisdictions involved, everyone saves money, and it becomes easier and easier because we learn with every event what's the best way to plan and promote. And to answer your question, Brian, yeah, so we're going to put this video recording on our YouTube video. We'll be putting the slides on our Marine Flare website, but also posting it to our social media. We are publicly funded trash nerds, so we try with social media. So please go ahead and give us a follow, because that's really where we promote our events, we promote our recordings, because it's really important to just get this message out there. So with the final few minutes, unless more questions come in, I do want to take a moment and thank each of you for attending today. It's through your leadership and advocacy that we can take on new product types to address our concerns and create permanent programs. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Vivian, for joining us and presenting. And thank you to all of our grant partners for your ongoing support. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your week. And again, if you have any questions that arise after this presentation, we're more than happy to help you. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.